Hello and welcome back to Concrete Play. Today we're going to talk about 1 of n. This is a really powerful way to let your players shape your game. It's also very common. I'm sure you will have heard of it before, although maybe not by this name. So let's start with a first-person shooter. Let's say you're playing Halo and you play Der Space Marine and you're running around and you just ran out of ammo or you're getting low on ammo. The big thing about Halo is that you can only pick 2 guns. You can only carry 2 guns. So when you're looking down at the ground and you see all these guns that the people left behind and you can choose from, you got to say, okay, well, which of these guns am I going to pick? I can't carry all of them. I can only carry 1 or 2 of them. Got to leave the rest of them behind. This lets the player choose their own path forward. Do they choose one of the guns that they know will have a lot of ammo? Do they choose one of the guns that's good at close in? Are they going to try and snipe? Are they going to try and do melee attacks? There's a lot of options depending on how they want to proceed. So they can continually sort of balance the options that you're giving them and the options that they're taking versus the challenges that they are getting into. And that's a really common, powerful theme in almost any game. Unless your game is just a pure skill challenge like Mario Brothers or a puzzle game, you're going to want to offer some level of choice. You're going to be like, well, is the player going to choose option A or option B? In this case, that choice boils down to guns. Now, another popular game, of course, is Borderlands, where you play the weird guy or whatever, and you've got 10,000 guns. Borderlands kind of does the exact opposite thing, where you can carry around just a crap ton of guns. Not every gun in the game. You have a limited inventory size, but you still have a surprising number of guns, and your inventory is quite large. There's not very much 1 of n gameplay in Borderlands. It's more of a pachinko machine. You're gambling rather than choosing. Obviously, you do make choices, but those aren't 1 of n choices. They're typically either tactical choices or strategic choices, like I'm running out of health, I better go back to base, or whatever, right? It's a very fun game. It doesn't rely very heavily on the 1 of n system. So I'm just letting you know that's not the only way to make games interesting. You can really spice up your game by doing this, but there are other approaches. Now, 1 of n has a huge advantage over this approach, and that is that it does a lot more with a lot less. Borderlands grew out of a massive system for creating magic guns, an infinite number of unique weaponry. That's great, but in Halo they just built like 7 or 8 guns. So Halo is a lot cheaper in terms of the number of assets. I think they probably ended up costing about the same because the Halo guns are super balanced and very carefully designed and all that stuff. But the basic idea is there. If you use 1 of n, you can have n be quite small. Whereas if you're just doing this approach over here, which is n of n has to be very large. So you can do more with less if you are choosing 1 of n. Now, as an example of that, let's talk about every RPG ever made. In these RPGs, they have the same, almost all of them have the same basic progression, where you level up and you get to choose what sort of powers you want, what sort of stat upgrades you want, what sort of traits you want, right? Very common. That's how you do it. You've got 6 stats and you can only get a +1 bonus to 1 of them. You're choosing 1 of n. You've got 18 powers and you can only buy 2 of them. That's 1 of n. And you've got 12 skills and you can only improve 6 of them. Again, that's the same basic idea of 1 of n. The huge advantage here is that skills and stats and powers, to some extent, those are pretty cheap to make, and you don't have to make very many of them. You just have to restrict the player to very few of them. So you can get away with creating a pretty limited selection, and that's the big advantage of an RPG. These games have very cheap content in comparison to, say, a first-person shooter. A first-person shooter that was going to take you 40 hours to beat, that would be a phenomenal amount of content. But an RPG, not that expensive in comparison. Now, there are still expensive RPGs, but that's another story. So, the game I'd like to talk about most when it comes to an RPG example is the KOTOR series. This is Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. They are available for your phone, so if you haven't played them, go play them. They're kind of old, but if you have a little bit of patience, I'm sure you will find that they can teach you a lot about RPG design. If anything, they're better than the Mass Effect series in terms of their design. So, just like in every other RPG, as you level up, you get your options. But unlike most RPGs, there's 4 concurrent upgrade paths, and every level can get you certain upgrades in each. So there's the stat path, there's the skill path, there's the trait path, and I think there's actually a separate powers path or something like that. Anyhow, these all happen, every 3rd level, every 4th level, so they're interwoven, and you get to have a lot of constant choices as to how your upgrade path is going to go, and it's never like set in stone because you're getting a different set of upgrades with each level. So it's nice. This level you might get a skill point bonus or a stat point bonus. Next level you might get a new power. Great. So that is better than most RPGs, but it's also nowhere near the end of it because in this game, like most RPGs, you choose a class up front. So this would be your non-Jedi class, and you get to choose whether you want to be a mechanic or whatever. Now, this is great for a couple of reasons. First off, it is a tactical choice, and we have been talking a lot about the tactical meaning of these choices. But it's also a character choice, and it lets you build your character to be whoever you feel like they should be. If you want to have a character that used to be an engineer, you pick engineer, and you feel like, okay, yeah, I understand this character. I understand more about how they see the universe and how they should act. It's a great way to get your players invested. They're building their character as they make tactical choices. Awesome! Great! Most RPGs just end it there, so you have your choice up front and that's it. And then the rest of the game, you're driven by that. So you might be able to choose whether you're planning to be an ice mage or a fire mage down the path, but the difference between those two is a lot less than the difference between a mage and a fighter. So there's a lot of argument that you're making the most important decision first. I don't think that's bad. Making the most important decision first allows you to get grounded right away. You're like, okay, I understand who I am because I have made the big choice. But KOTOR is good about this because after a few levels, you graduate to Jedi, and you get to choose from another set of classes, and these are your Jedi classes. And that really matters as well. Are you the kind of Jedi that goes out and hunts Sith, or are you the kind of Jedi that helps people? And then it happens again with the prestige Jedi classes. So that's great because they have split this massive choice up into 3 chunks, and you get them at different points in the game as you are developing your sense for how you are interacting with the game's force mechanics and the world and the writing. You're like, okay, I think I like. Here you're like, okay, I want to be a mechanic. Oh, I think I understand how this force stuff feels. So now I want to be a defender. Oh, I think I understand how this defender stuff feels. I think it's time for me to graduate to a new kind of defender. Great. That's not where it ends. You also, over the course of the game, have a huge number of dialogue options that let you choose whether you're going to be good or bad in any given dialogue. Now, this is flawed because although it should be one of N, it never is. You make right up front, the very first choice you probably make in the game is whether you're going to play a good guy or a bad guy. And after that, you basically just always choose whichever option you chose in the first place. So the other options might not even exist. They don't even count as existing. So there's really only one choice, and it's right up front. It's the very first thing you do. I'm going to be good or I'm going to be bad, and the rest of your choices just kind of automatic after that point. But this system could be refined, and you could have a system or an RPG where each of these dialogue options was actually quite a challenge for you to decide. And you do have to think, which of these options do I want to take? I can see myself taking any of them, rather than, oh, there are 3 dialogue options and I'm going to pick the good one because I always pick the good one. But that isn't it either, because you see you've got a whole bunch of guests on your ship, and all of your guests have all of these options as well. So KOTOR is a fantastic one-of-N machine. And if you play KOTOR or watch a Let's Play of KOTOR, you'll really get a feel for how this game is put together. And it's really an excellent design, and it's a shame that more games haven't followed it. We do have a couple of games later on that did something similar. Mass Effect 3 improved on this formula by allowing you to interrupt dialogue with a Paragon or Renegade action, but it's still split into that Paragon and Renegade, and you probably made that decision right when you started the game. So it's not really a choice, it's just a skill test whether you notice the fact that there's now a real-time event. So there's a lot of space for improvement here, and a lot of games haven't actually improved on this philosophy at all. But this is a very, very powerful philosophy. Now, if you've ever played KOTOR, you'll know this is a big set of games. KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 are massive. They take place on literally dozens of planets, and all of these planets have huge cities and dungeons, massive forests for you to explore. There's so much going on, and that content is really, really expensive. The good news is, this content is basically free. Now, sure, writing dialogue takes time, but these upgrade paths and that sort of stuff, all that stuff is just built into a system. It's a couple lines of text, it's a couple lines of combat tree logic. It's not going to cost you as much as building a planet's assets. So 1 of N is a way to make your games really, really cheap, but really, really deeply investive. So your player comes in and they're asked to make a choice. You have to choose between these 4 quite good options. Which of these 4 quite good options do you want? When they make that choice, they're like, okay, I have made an important choice. I understand the game world better, I understand my character better, I understand where I'm going better, and I really feel great. So I recommend that you think about using the 1 of N methods in every game. You won't be able to use them in every game, but if you think about it for a little while, you might find that you can make your game a lot more interesting on the cheap by putting in some 1 of N options. Anyhow, I hope you liked this particular episode, and I'll think of something else to say. I have lots to say, never run out of something to say. Think about which to say next. I can only say one thing at a time. One of these N things.